Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
Okay, so you want to get a handle on smart contracts in supply chains? Like, really understand the impact beyond all the hype.
Yeah.
We're going deep on this research paper from the Journal of Marketing Research.
Yeah.
To do just that.
It's a fascinating paper. It really gets into like the nitty-gritty economics of blockchain and supply chains. It's not just about like efficiency.
Right.
It's about who benefits and who might actually lose out.
And this isn't just some theoretical stuff either. We're talking real-world impact on things like, how your coffee gets to you.
Right.
Those massive construction projects downtown, even global shipping.
Exactly. Yeah. This technology is touching practically every product you buy.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Imagine a vending machine, right? But instead of snacks, it dispenses digital agreements. You put in your digital coins, let's say proof that a shipment arrived, and boom, the payment to the supplier is automatically released. That's a smart contract in a nutshell.
Perfect analogy. And the key to all of this working is blockchain technology acting like a super secure digital ledger.
Right.
Everyone in the supply chain can see the transactions, nobody can cheat the system, and it's all automated.
So Walmart Canada using sensors to track logistics costs and automatically settle invoices. That's a smart contract powered by blockchain.
Exactly. But things get really interesting when you introduce smart contracts into more complex scenarios with multiple players, each with their own motivations and bargaining power.
Like when a seller's costs are fixed, but the buyer's demand for the product goes up and down. Like maybe a trendy new gadget or something.
Right. And the research paper calls that value uncertainty. And that's where we start seeing some of the unexpected consequences of smart contracts.
Unexpected consequences. I thought smart contracts were supposed to be all about making things more efficient and transparent.
They are, but more efficient doesn't always mean fairer, especially when you have different players with different levels of bargaining power.
So if I'm like a big retailer with tons of buying power, smart contracts might actually put me at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, right? You'd think having more power would always work in your favor. But the paper shows how in certain scenarios, smart contracts can actually shift the balance of power. They actually take a deep dive into the world of wholesale and resale pricing to find that out.
Oh, interesting. Okay, walk me through that. With regular contracts, it's all about negotiating fixed prices, right?
Right.
The seller and the middleman, they haggle over the wholesale price.
Yep.
Then the middleman goes on to haggle with the buyer over the resale price.
Exactly. But with smart contracts, those prices can fluctuate based on real-time data like production costs or consumer demand. And that can lead to some surprising outcomes.
Okay, for example.
Let's say a seller and a middleman use a smart contract where the resale price automatically adjusts to what the buyer is willing to pay. Seems fair, right?
Yeah, it seems like the buyer's getting a good deal. They're only paying what the product is worth to them at that moment.
You'd think so. But here's the catch. The buyer loses the power to say no once their value for the product is revealed. The middleman knows exactly what they're willing to pay and can basically name their price.
So even though the supply chain is more efficient, the buyer might end up paying more than they would have with a regular contract.
Potentially, yes. And what's even more surprising is that the seller who isn't even using the smart contract might benefit because the middleman has more profit to share.
That's wild. So smart contracts can have this ripple effect where benefits and losses aren't always obvious or predictable. It really makes you think about the power dynamics at play.
Exactly. And it gets even more complex when you introduce scenarios where both the seller's costs and the buyer's value are fluctuating, which the paper calls double uncertainty.
So like agricultural products where weather can impact harvests and consumer demand can shift quickly.
Precisely. In those situations, even a smart contract where everyone is on board, seller, middleman, and buyer, might not be the best solution for everyone involved.
So how do you figure out when to use smart contracts and when to stick with the old-fashioned way of doing things?
Well, the researchers found that it often boils down to a classic game theory problem called the prisoner's dilemma.
Okay, I remember that term, but could you break it down for me?
Sure. It all comes down to trust and self-interest. Imagine you and a friend are both accused of a crime and you're being interrogated separately.
Sounds familiar.
You each have two choices: stay silent or betray the other. If you both stay silent, you both get a light sentence. If you both betray each other, you both get a moderate sentence. But if one betrays the other, the betrayer goes free and the silent one gets a heavy sentence.
So the best outcome for both of you is to stay silent and cooperate.
Yeah.
But the temptation is to betray each other to avoid that worst-case scenario of a heavy sentence.
Exactly. It's a classic dilemma. And it's similar to what happens with smart contracts and supply chains. The middleman almost always wins with smart contracts because they have more information and flexibility. But the buyer and seller each have to decide whether to risk using a smart contract or stick with a traditional contract, knowing that the other party might choose differently.
So even if everyone would be better off cooperating and using a smart contract, the fear of being betrayed can lead to sticking with the less efficient but safer option of a regular contract.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest challenges to widespread adoption of smart contracts.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about the human psychology and the trust, or lack thereof, between different players in the supply chain.
Absolutely. And that's something we can't overlook as we continue to explore the potential of this technology.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Smart contracts are clearly more than just a tech upgrade. They're changing the game of how profits are made and shared. But the question of who benefits and who loses is complex, and sometimes the answers are counterintuitive.
It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll take a look at some real-world examples of how smart contracts are being used from coffee to shipping, and explore how these theoretical concepts are playing out in practice.
And we'll also address a really insightful question you had earlier. Is all of this really a zero-sum game? Or can smart contracts be designed in a way that benefits everyone?
Great, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around how we move away from this us versus them mentality and towards a more collaborative approach to smart contracts.
I think the key lies in the idea of a permissioned blockchain, which we'll unpack in the next part.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the potential downsides, right? Like especially when it comes to bargaining power.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that there might be ways to design these contracts to be more equitable.
Yeah.
Something got a permissioned blockchain.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about blockchain being like a digital ledger that everyone can see? Well, there are different types of blockchains.
Okay, so like what's a permissioned blockchain? And how is that different from the regular kind?
Think of it this way. A public blockchain, like the one that Bitcoin uses, it's like a giant public park. Anyone can just, enter and use it.
Right.
A permissioned blockchain is more like a private club. You have to be invited to join, and there are rules about, who can access the information and participate in the network.
So in the context of supply chains, a company could create a permissioned blockchain that only includes their trusted suppliers, distributors, and retailers.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And by controlling who has access, you can build more trust and transparency from the start. It's a way to create like a more collaborative environment where everyone is working towards a common goal instead of just trying to outsmart each other.
That makes a lot of sense. But how does that actually address the power imbalances we talked about earlier?
Well, with a permissioned blockchain, you can actually build mechanisms into the smart contract itself that promote fairness and balance.
Give me an example.
Let's say you're a farmer selling coffee beans. With a traditional contract, you might have to just accept a low price from a powerful middleman because you have limited options.
And that middleman can then turn around and sell those beans at a much higher price to like a big coffee chain or something.
Exactly. But with a smart contract on a permissioned blockchain, you could set up a system where the profit is shared more equitably between you, the middleman, and the retailer.
So you're cutting out the possibility of someone taking advantage of their position in the supply chain.
Right. The smart contract could automatically distribute a percentage of the final sale price back to you, the farmer, based on pre-agreed terms.
That's pretty amazing. It's like baking fairness into the system itself.
Exactly. And it's not just about profit sharing. You can also use smart contracts to incentivize good behavior.
What do you mean by that?
Let's say you want to promote sustainable farming practices. You could build a smart contract that rewards farmers who meet certain environmental standards.
So they might get like a bonus payment for using organic fertilizers or conserving water?
Exactly. Or maybe you want to ensure on-time deliveries. You could set up a smart contract that penalizes delays.
So everyone is motivated to uphold their end of the bargain.
Right.
It's like having a built-in system of checks and balances.
Precisely. And because all of this is happening on a secure, transparent blockchain, everyone knows the rules and can see that they're being enforced fairly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how smart contracts, when designed thoughtfully, can be more than just a tool for efficiency. They can be a powerful force for positive change within a supply chain. But let's get real for a second. Are companies actually doing this?
They are. Remember that Bex 360 company we mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
They're using a combination of IoT sensors, AI, and blockchain to transform coffee supply chains.
Yeah, they were tracking the journey of coffee beans from farm to cup.
Right. But they're doing more than just tracking. They're also using smart contracts to empower farmers and ensure they're getting paid fairly for their high-quality beans.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So they have these mobile stations set up in coffee-growing regions. Farmers bring their harvested beans to the station where they're analyzed, using AI to assess quality. Then, based on that assessment, a fair price is automatically calculated and agreed upon.
So the farmer isn't just accepting whatever price the middleman offers. They have data to back up the value of their product.
Exactly. And that transaction is recorded on the blockchain, creating a permanent and transparent record that everyone can see.
No more shady backroom deals or price manipulation.
Right. And then as those beans move through the supply chain, from processing to roasting to brewing, every step is tracked and recorded.
So I can potentially walk into my local coffee shop, scan a QR code, and see the entire journey of the beans in my latte.
Exactly. You could see which farm they came from, how they were processed, and even how much the farmer was paid.
Wow, talk about transparency. I think a lot of coffee drinkers would be willing to pay a premium for that level of information and assurance that the farmers are getting a fair deal.
That's what Bex 360 is banking on. They're targeting ethically conscious consumers who are willing to vote with their dollars.
It's a brilliant model. And it sounds like a win-win for everyone involved.
Right.
The farmers get a fair price, the consumers get transparency, and the middlemen, well, they still get their cut, but in a more ethical and sustainable way.
Exactly. And that's just one example. There are other companies using blockchain and smart contracts to track everything from diamonds to pharmaceuticals to shipping containers.
So this isn't just some niche technology. It's really starting to gain traction across a wide range of industries.
It is, but it's important to remember that there are still challenges to overcome.
Like what?
Well, for one, scalability. Can these systems handle the massive volume of transactions that happen in a global supply chain?
Right, we're talking about millions, if not billions, of transactions happening every day.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of interoperability. Right now, different companies are using different blockchain platforms.
So it's like trying to get a bunch of people speaking different languages to work together seamlessly.
Precisely. We need to find ways to make these systems talk to each other if we want to truly unlock the potential of blockchain for global trade.
So a lot of technical hurdles to overcome, but the potential benefits are huge. We've talked about the theory. We've seen some real-world examples.
Now, let's shift gears and talk about how all of this might impact you directly.
Okay, because so far we've been talking about coffee beans and shipping containers.
Yeah.
But how could smart contracts affect things like healthcare voting and even the arts?
That's where things get really interesting, and that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep on smart contracts and supply chains.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, and the potentially revolutionary. But it sounds like this technology has implications far beyond just moving products around.
Absolutely. Smart contracts have the potential to disrupt almost every industry.
Yeah.
And even change how we interact on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, color me intrigued. Let's get into some specifics. What could this look like for the average person?
Well, let's start with healthcare. Imagine all your medical records securely stored on a blockchain, accessible only by you and your chosen healthcare providers.
So no more carrying around those bulky files or trying to remember which doctor has what piece of information.
Exactly. And because blockchain is so secure,
Right.
you significantly reduce the risk of your data being hacked or compromised.
That's a big win for patient privacy.
Yeah.
But besides the security aspect, what else could smart contracts do in the world of healthcare?
Think about all those tedious processes we all dread. Insurance claims, prescription refills. Smart contracts could automate those completely.
Oh man, that would be a lifesaver. I think everyone has spent hours on the phone trying to sort out an insurance issue at some point.
Right. Smart contracts could streamline those processes, saving everyone time and money.
Okay, I'm sold on the healthcare applications. What other areas of our lives could be impacted?
Let's talk about voting. Fair and transparent elections are essential for a healthy democracy. But there are always concerns about potential fraud or manipulation.
And ensuring that everyone has equal access to the polls.
Exactly. Blockchain-based voting systems could potentially address many of those concerns.
Okay, I'm listening. How would that even work?
Every vote would be recorded on a blockchain, making it virtually impossible to tamper with the results.
So no more hanging chads or recounts that drag on for weeks.
Hopefully not. And it could potentially make voting more accessible, allowing people to vote from anywhere with an internet connection.
That could be huge for voter turnout, especially among younger generations or people with mobility issues.
It could. Of course, there are challenges to address, like ensuring the system is secure and accessible to everyone, including those without reliable internet access.
Yeah, that's a really important point. We can't create a system that disenfranchises people who lack digital access.
Absolutely. But there are people working on solutions like creating offline voting mechanisms that can be synced with the blockchain later.
So bridging the digital divide will be crucial for any blockchain-based voting system to be truly fair and equitable. Okay, healthcare voting. You also mentioned something about the creative arts.
Yes. This is where things get really interesting, especially for independent creators. Imagine a world where artists can use smart contracts to manage their copyrights and royalties automatically.
Okay, I'm a musician. Walk me through this.
You create a song and embed a smart contract that specifies how it can be used and how royalties are distributed. Every time someone streams your song or uses it in a commercial, you automatically get paid.
So no more chasing down payments or dealing with complicated royalty statements.
Exactly. The smart contract does all the heavy lifting. And you can even set up micropayment systems where people pay a tiny fraction of a cent to listen to your song.
That could be a game changer for musicians, especially those who are just starting out and don't have big record labels backing them.
Right. And it could also open up new possibilities for collaboration. Imagine several musicians working together on a project, and the smart contract automatically distributes the royalties based on each person's contribution.
It's like having a built-in manager and accountant all rolled into one. Okay, so healthcare, voting, the arts. It seems like smart contracts could empower individuals in so many different aspects of their lives.
Exactly. And that's what makes this technology so fascinating. It's not just about making businesses more efficient. It's about rethinking the way we interact and transact and creating a more equitable and transparent world.
So it's like a new set of tools for building a better future.
Yeah.
But with any new tool, it's all about how we use it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think we've officially gone down the rabbit hole with this deep dive into smart contracts. We've explored the technical details, the potential pitfalls, and the incredible possibilities.
It's been quite a journey.
But hopefully a valuable one for our listeners. So as always, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the future of smart contracts? What excites you and what concerns you? Head over to our social media channels and join the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more captivating deep dives like this one. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.